Welcome to Ascend to Earth, the podcast where embodiment is the ascension. I'm Virginia Underwood, your co-host and sacred wisdom keeper, oracle, and earth steward. I'll be joined by my daughter and co-host, Hannah Pearl, soul alchemist, astro herbalist, and intuition mentor. This is a space for the seekers, the sensitives, the cycle breakers, and the wild hearts returning to their truth. Each episode will explore what it means to come home to the body through sacred conversation, emotional alchemy, nervous system healing, ancestral wisdom, and earth-based spirituality. We'll also be sitting in circle with other wisdom keepers, visionaries, and embodied leaders, voices who are here to midwife the new world. Here, we don't escape, we descend, we feel, we root, we rise. Let's ascend to Earth. Narcissism.
Yeah. So what
So,
is narcissism?
yeah, narcissism is um, somebody who has an excessive focus on themselves, very self-focused. They need outside validation and they struggle to relate to other people's feelings. That's what I see narcissism as.
Yeah.
Do you have anything to add to that?
Someone who wants to or feels like jealous or can't hold another person's success, doesn't feel like there's enough space for everyone. So there's a feeling of wanting to be superior or feeling like they're superior, like maybe very competitive, um, obsessed with their self-image and the way that they're being perceived,
Gee,
wanting to
doesn't,
control other people's perception
yeah.
of that of them.
Oh, wow.
I saw
A
that bird
blue.
in the reflection of the window.
So cool. Like he was emphasizing, um, it seems to me like the culture that we have been brought up in.
Yes. Well, yeah, because like all of those things are well, and then you hear the stories, of the empath and the narcissist. And usually it's like in a relational context that an empath ends up being in a relationship with a narcissist. But I think that is true because they are on the same spectrum.
Right.
So empath and narcissist are on the same line. And so therefore, to be empathic is also to know narcissism.
Yes. And, when you're in one extreme, so if you're in the narcissistic extreme, then all those things that we talked about really apply very strongly. There's no ability to relate to anyone else because it's all about me. And with the empath, when they're on the, far end of the empathic spectrum, then it's all about everyone else and feeling everyone else's, and it becomes that martyr energy, that people pleasing to the extreme. And so I feel that the healthy um would be to be in the middle where you have some of that, not necessarily looking for validation or craving attention, but appreciating the right kind of attention and appreciating that you are a beautiful being of the universe and that you have value and you know that energy, and that you can understand other people's feelings. You can put yourself in their shoes. You know what it feels like, so you're not going to behave in a way that invalidates that person or um, dismisses their feelings. Um, and there's more of a cooperative energy, being able to see somebody else's value, celebrate with them, or, you know, sit with them when they're having a rough time. Um, but not get
Yeah.
caught up in the emotions or the need to fix the other person.
Like losing your sense of boundary or
Self.
self in someone
Right.
else. And I think like finding the balance between narcissism and empathy or being an empath is like valuing yourself so much so that you find value in everyone else as well. Because I feel like the extreme, being a narcissist, you don't value either way. Actually, being a narcissist or being an on the other
Ex-
side of that, like the extreme side of like being an empath is you don't value yourself
Right.
because you don't value yourself and then you're looking for everybody else to validate you or you're looking at other people's flaws to validate your perceived uh, perfection
Right.
or your you don't value yourself
Say
and
that again.
or the other side of that is that you don't value yourself and you're looking outside of yourself and you're needing to take care of everybody else
To find
either
value.
did I cut out? Did you hear what I said though?
Yeah, you're not valuing yourself. You're finding that value in other people and like people pleasing tendencies, is what you were
Yeah.
saying.
Yes. So either way. And so the way to find the balance in that is to find value inside.
Yes.
And it doesn't come from, being better than or less than anybody else. It comes from accepting
You're
one, we are all reflections of each other, and to accept everyone else, to accept ourselves is to, that's to accept all parts of us, all the aspects.
yes, right?
And I think that um, it definitely is a product or a symptom more so of our society.
Mhm.
And I think that it's a lot deeper than, just being given a diagnosis or
Well, honestly, I don't like diagnoses. I think that having a frame of reference for something isn't a bad thing. However, when we attach our identity to that, that is detrimental
yeah,
because I am not whatever diagnoses I have, you know. Um, I have ADHD, but I am not ADHD. And I can do things to help myself lessen the, say, negative qualities of that, like in terms, let's say, of focus, right? I can take care of myself in ways that help me to cultivate focus in my life. And the beautiful thing about ADHD is that when you are really into something, you hyper focus, like you get into the flow state with that. And that's not a bad thing at all. So,
It's not demonizing anything.
right,
Like it's not, it's the demonization. Like, oh, this is bad. And the identification. Like I am this thing and this thing is bad.
right,
Or I am this thing and this thing is good. And so then everything becomes revolved around this identity that you've created. And you either use it as an excuse to continue the behaviors because well, that's just who I am, that's just how I am. Um, and really, I think it's like, how do we learn how to find the positive qualities in all of these different spectrum of mental stuff and be able to use it in a way that's helpful.
right. Yeah, because I think that, well, I know that as a human, and this ties back to us being all one, like we are capable of everything, every behavior, every thought, every symptom, if you will, um, by virtue of being human, like that's part of what we have access to.
Mm-hmm.
So we can choose, and oftentimes it's unconscious choice, right? It's a pattern that we've picked up through our genetics, through our um, relationships, through our understanding of our culture.
Yeah, our environment.
Right. So we're all capable of all of these things. And ultimately, it becomes a matter of what do we want to create in our lives? How do we want to behave? Like right before we got on this call, I was talking about how I've been thinking a lot about how I am the designer and the storyteller, the writer of my own story. And what kind of story do I want to tell about my life? And how do I want to show up in my life? And years ago, this was so unconscious. I didn't have a choice because I wasn't aware that I had a choice. So now that I'm aware that I have a choice, that I can choose how I show up in every situation and how I feel about myself and how I interact with everyone in the situation or my environment, then how do I want to show up? Who do I want to be? And the archetype that continues to come up for me is the queen. It's time for me to step in the queen energy. And so every day I'm looking at, well, how would a queen react to this? How would a queen show up in this situation? How would a queen feel about herself when somebody is doing X, Y, or Z? And coming from that place instead of that old story of, oh, nobody values me. I'm not seen. I'm not heard. I'm not appreciated. I can't do anything right. Whatever those stories are that we're telling ourselves that keep us in that limited place.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The stories, we're really good at making stories. So we can
Yeah.
actually use that skill to our advantage in our lives. And I've been thinking a lot about stories as well. And in the way of like, we don't, no one actually knows what the fuck is going on. And we have a lot of stories and ideas about what the fuck is going on. And we're really good at making up reasons why and how. But then what about the, like, what the content? like focusing on what's actually happening right here, right now, and letting the experience speak for itself. Because the
Yes.
story will come, I mean, that's just a given because that's in our nature. We have to
Right.
have a container in order to experience the contrast of life. So we've made it this far in our evolution from our ancestors because of the stories that we've told, because of the art that we've shared, the things that we've created. And we can get really trapped in that part of it and forget that like we actually have to live it. Like we actually have to like if we keep telling ourselves the same old story, then we will never experience the magic that is possible in every moment. Like, okay, maybe there's like a couple factors that are similar, but this is like chemistry too. If you change one little tiny thing, it's going to change the entire reaction.
That's right.
So even if you're, let's say, for example, you're in a relationship with someone who's very similar to a partner that you had before, it's not actually the same thing because there's a completely different context going on.
That's right.
And you know, yeah, it's just different. Like it can't possibly, unless you're telling yourself the same story, it can't go the same.
Yeah. Well, right. If you're telling the same story, then it's not going to be exactly the same, but the outcome is probably going to be similar to what you've experienced before because you're behaving in a similar fashion to what you did when you had the
Yeah,
outcome prior. But if you change the story, I mean, I can tell you so many stories from my life about how I had an idea of how something would end up, but then in the midst of it, I realized or remembered that, hey, I don't have to believe this old story. I can allow this to be whatever it's going to be and be open and receptive to something different. And it completely changed the outcome to something totally different than what I had experienced prior.
yeah, yeah. I mean, how many times have you? Yeah, I don't know. I feel like that's so common of like having expectations of something, and life never it never goes quite how you imagined. It's even like making art or something. Like you can have a vision or an idea. You were like had this seed planted of this like thing that you want to create, but then every piece of art I've ever created has never looked the way that I thought it was going to when I saw that initial image in my head. It's always transformed. And if I've stayed open to it, it's always turned out better than I could have imagined in the first place. And I think that's the same thing as long as we stay open, because there's plenty of times also where I've made art and I got caught up in the fact that it's not turning out the way that I thought it would. So then I stopped doing it. Or then I just like get really frustrated and I stop doing it. And then
Yeah,
I don't ever give it a chance to like live and to tell its own story and to be its own thing. I'm like trying to control it and control the outcome. And that's like life. Life is art. We just like opening up and allowing, because I don't own the idea either, right? Like it's
right.
not mine. It's coming through me. And I every time I've ever finished an art piece that I allowed that process to go through, I have always been like, whoa, I did that? That came, and it's like, it came through me. It's
Yes,
not me.
right.
Um, and to tie this back to like mental health, also, it's the story, the diagnosis is the story.
Yes.
and it's saying, okay, this is what this looks like. So then everything gets filtered through the lens of that story.
Right. The limitation.
And you can find 1,000 infinite ways to validate the story. Now that you
Right.
have a framework, you know what your brain knows what to look for,
Mm-hmm.
and it's going to find reasons, and you're going to subconsciously create reasons to validate your story because you've identified with the story.
Yes.
So if we know that to be true, then why don't we create stories that are more in alignment with what we actually desire on a soul level?
Mm-hmm. And I think that it's interesting that we're having this conversation on a day when, Mars is quincunx Uranus, because Uranus being that great awakener and Mars being our desires, it's having to go through the pain of seeing these stories not working out the way that we imagine them to, right? Our expectations getting here. But Mars being in this position is through that challenge and maybe even a tower moment, having the awareness that, hey, this is actually my desire. So letting go of what those expectations are to see that if we want to meet our desires, we have to let go of these old stories that have been limiting us from that.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense, what I just said?
Yeah, it does. Well, and that's, I mean, looking at the collective shift. I mean, there's a huge collective shift happening right now, but with Uranus in Gemini, moving like transition into Gemini, into that air sign after being in an earth sign
Mm-hmm.
for the last like 7 years. It's really interesting because it does feel like a collective, like Uranus being the higher consciousness. So we're collectively expanding our consciousness around, and it being an air sign, around our perceptions
Right.
and how that affects our lives and how we operate in the world. And I mean that even goes to say like on a larger scale with like AI and like what is that reflecting to us about ourselves, and just on a larger scale, society's stories and how those are all crumbling.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And it being in Gemini, Gemini is about our environment, our immediate environment. It's about communication, and not just with other people, but how we communicate with ourselves
yes, because
and
that's
our
where the
environment.
real that's where the structure of society comes from, right? Like it's not this thing outside of us, it's actually us. We're all individually, collectively creating this reality. We're co-creating this reality with each other. And it takes, it's no more of that like, oh, I'll just wait for somebody else to do it, or I'll blindly put my faith in this system or this person or this thing outside of myself to have my best interest in mind, but that's not fucking possible
Right.
because only I have that. Only I know that because only I know me. It's the sacred loneliness. There's a part
Mhm.
of us that only we can know about ourselves that nobody else will be able to see. And when we start taking responsibility to come back to bring our awareness back to that space, then we can start to shift the stories. And I think that is such a cool um reflection of Uranus and Gemini that you bring up with the immediate environment, because it comes back to like the story that we're collectively telling starts with us.
Yes. Yes. And then you throw in Pluto and Pluto in Aquarius, so it's making a trine to Uranus at 1 degree Gemini. And what we know about Aquarius is that it is the individual, right? And so trining that energy, it's a very supportive energy in helping you to get in touch with that and to look at where you've been giving your power away to the stories, to the um, you know,
The
the
narrative.
limiting beliefs that have kept us or kept you stuck in a system that no longer supports you.
Yes. And like being an air signs,
Hmm.
it is having to do with the mind and mental health as well.
Yes.
And
Yes.
so it's reframing, like, well, and how long has society ignored the mental aspect?
Well, yeah. I mean, there's been such a stigma around, therapeutic methods to help the mind. Um, and what's also interesting to me is that we have the sun at 1 degree Libra. It's about to switch into 2 degrees, but it's still making that it's a grand air trine with these three right now. So it's
Yeah,
like today is this perfect day for illuminating this energy in our lives.
yeah.
And of course, this won't be posted on this day. Um,
But around
but
the time, it's still relevant.
right.
Yeah, it is really interesting um, how we're shining a light on, and this is just going to keep happening too, because Uranus is going to be in Gemini for a while, and Pluto's going to be in Aquarius for a while, and the sun's going to keep coming back to the air signs. It's like, so we're going to keep revisiting this theme.
Right.
And actually, I think I saw too that Uranus is conjunct Sedna at 1 degree Gemini,
Oh, yeah.
which is another, that's another way in which we see how we've been betrayed by the narrative, the narrative outside of ourselves, the story of um and how our own, like what I'm thinking of is the collection of data, and how our own data is being used against us
Mm,
in a way to manipulate us to fall
absolutely.
deeper into the narrative. And if you
Yeah.
look at all the things that are happening in the world right now and how easily influenced our minds can be, like we can feel the shit without even having to like watch the news, or you know what I mean? Like
Yes.
it's the mind. I feel like the mind is a collective thing. It's a lot um more complex, I guess, if you will, than what we've been taught. Like the mind is this collective field that we're all
Right.
connected to, and we're all like tapped into like these different radio stations in this field,
Yes, exactly. Mhm.
and where uh we can get, like when you're driving somewhere and the radio, like the stations change, you start
Right.
tapping into different things. So it's like being in a certain environment, you get access to different channels. And
Yeah.
when there's all this stuff being spread out there, it's really easy to find yourself tuning into those channels
Right.
without, if you're not conscious of it.
And that makes me think about David Hawkins' map of consciousness and the different levels of consciousness and vibration. And when you are vibrating on a particular level, then you're also going to behave in a particular way. Like there are certain set attributes to each of these levels of consciousness that like we don't even we don't have to be consciously aware of what they are in order to be in them. Like it's like that radio station, when you're tuned into a country station, you're hearing country music and it's going to have a particular feel and a particular way of expressing itself.
Hmm.
And it's the same with whatever you're thinking, like it's the same with what we're just talking about.
Yeah. Well, and it's like I can't remember the exact, I don't know, there's something about like you tell yourself the same thoughts every day. Like the
Yes.
amount of times that your thoughts repeat every single day. And so that is like we've when you're driving again, and you zone out
Hmm.
and you don't realize maybe that you've heard the same song multiple times, or you're not really paying attention to the music that's playing or something. You're just like zoned out. And it's kind of like how some of us sometimes operate in the world, is like zoning out and not realizing, not paying attention to like the thoughts that we're telling ourselves, the frequency that we're
Well,
tuned into.
to your driving point, it's that whole idea of, when I know how to drive and I don't need to think about where my feet go, where my hands go, where I need to put my attention in order to steer, to maneuver the car through the world. So, how many times have you been driving somewhere, you have your destination and you've been to this destination many times before? How many times do you drive and don't even remember how you got there because you're not focused on what's actually happening in your immediate environment. You're lost in something else. You're somewhere else. So you're
Mm-hmm.
not aware that you're performing these behaviors. You're braking because somebody in front of you slowed down or there's a stoplight, you know, but you get to your destination and it's like you come out of wherever you were at and you're like, oh, wow, how did I get here?
Mm-hmm.
It's the same thing. We don't think about the thoughts that we're having. We have the same fucking thoughts that we've had every single day. And one day we wake up and we're like, how did I get here?
Yeah, exactly. It's like we look at children and we're like, oh, we need to get back to this childlike state. How do we do that? Well, it's like, well, children are learning how to be in their bodies. So they're actually their awareness is in their motor
Body.
skills, and like they're so focused on picking up the pencil or whatever, or they're running. They're like learning how to run and use their body. And then the stories start developing about like, this is how you do it. So you might think that you're like this really great driver, but that's because you keep telling yourself this story because you learned how to do it in this one specific way. And then it's like, okay, now I'm done. Now I can go on autopilot.
Right.
But it's coming back to that childlike curiosity and openness, is the fact that there is infinite possibilities for how we can do anything.
Yes.
And so how can we keep ourselves open to the different ways that we can drive better, or the different ways that we can like discover our bodies? How many of us have been in our body? Well, I mean, we've been in our bodies for our whole lives. But how many of us actually like, well, and I'll just use myself as an example. I have in the last like 2 years discovered more about my body than I have even realized was possible, you know, by taking time to be more intentional, to discover different movements, to do different practices, to like open myself up to something different than what I've known. And I've realized like, whoa, it's a lot, it can keep going deeper. There's so much to be aware of. Like, we actually don't ever get to that point, I feel like, in this dimension where we stop.
No, it's infinite. Yeah. It's it's about presence. And I think that this is something that we talk about in every single podcast. Because if we truly want to have the best life that we can possibly have, we have to be present. We have to stop putting ourselves on autopilot in all these different ways and come back to presence. And I think, you know, obviously meditation is a great tool for that. Yoga is a great tool for that. You know, when you're in a yoga session, and you are doing poses that require your attention because you've never done them before or because they're really hard to get into, it's bringing your attention to this present moment, to the breath, to what is happening, so that you can get your body into that posture. And you know, once we've done this for 20 years, then we go into that autopilot again, right? But if we can stay in the presence, there's always something to learn, even if we've done it for 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think about yoga. I think it would be beneficial for most people to do yoga teacher training, even if they have no intention of being a yoga teacher, because it's really, um, I feel like the way to, it's cues, like hearing a bunch of cues as you're going through a yoga sequence. Those cues are the anchor that help you to align with what you're doing. And it might even be like you've been hearing the same cues for however long, and it doesn't hit you until a certain point where it's like one day it clicks and it's like, oh, that's what that means when you say plug your femur bone in. Or, and then you actually realize that a lot of the cues are the same fucking thing. They're
Mm.
just telling you the same thing in a different way because it's going to make sense to some people this way and it's going to make sense to other people this way. But it's actually the same thing, just trying to get you into the shape. And that's why it's like sometimes, like, you can go to yoga with the same, like, learn from the same person and get to know their cues really, really well. And then go somewhere else and do a yoga class with somebody who has completely different cues, and it's confusing.
Yeah.
And so I think it's beneficial to stay open and to try yoga with a bunch of different people so that you can um, have a wide variety of understanding of different ways to describe what you're doing with your body and a different way to visualize it. Um, and that's what I learned in yoga teacher training. It was just like it's the cues in itself are like getting me into my body. And now I can do yoga on my own. You know, I don't need somebody to, I don't technically need anybody to be there to walk me through a sequence. I like that because it challenges me and pushes me. But if I need to, I can do it on my own. And the cues are going off in my head. I'm paying attention to where my foot is. I'm paying attention to where my hand is. I'm paying attention to, you know, it's like one of the things one of my teachers told me was like, it's about fidgeting in between, like paying attention to how much you fidget in between postures and how you get into them. And like, if you're in alignment, then you don't have to fidget in between because your foot's already exactly where it needs to be. Your hand's exactly where it needs to be. And then it flows effortlessly through all of the postures. And so now I pay attention so much to like where I'm fidgeting. And then I notice that in my own life. how do I set myself up for success? And it's by being so fucking completely aware of where I'm at in this moment and where I'm going next and where I just was. And that brings me to the next thing that I've been thinking about a lot is in order to make holistic decisions in our life, we have to take into a whole. So we have to make decisions for every single version of ourselves. All the ones that came before and all the ones that will come after. So what are you doing in your day that's honoring all parts of you? Because they all exist in this moment. And the only way to make decisions for your whole self is to be present with all of
Mhm.
you right here.
That's true.
And that can make being present really hard when you've had trauma or unresolved patterns. Because if you're here right now, then you have to acknowledge the hurt and the pain.
Right. Yeah, you have to feel it. Sit with it and allow it. But the beautiful thing too is that if you do that, an emotion only really lasts for about 90 seconds. And if you can sit with it without attaching a story, then those 90 minutes pass and you gain more understanding of yourself and that emotion, that story, even. Um, so you can really change how you show up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, we spend all this time trying to distract ourselves to prolong that like 90 seconds of pain or discomfort. It's kind of like this is coming to my mind like getting a piercing or something.
Hmm.
Um and at least in my experience, because I've had a lot of piercings in my life, but like I I also have had this fear of pain. And so like there's always been this like knowing that I want to do this thing, but knowing that that means that there's going to be pain. And then knowing, like, when I know that I'm going to go do that, then there's the anxiety or the buildup, anticipation of the pain. And then it happens, and it's literally like a fucking second. And then it's over, and it's like, oh, that wasn't that bad. And that feels like what we're talking about in general. It's like,
Yes,
how long do we prolong our suffering through the anticipation of pain.
right. Well, yeah, what I was thinking about was how many people have a painful experience and then they stay in that pain for sometimes the rest of their life.
Yeah.
And they look for validation and they look for, the what's the word I'm looking for? They look for this everywhere,
Mm-hmm.
examples of this everywhere to validate their pain. This happened. That means I am this person. So I'm okay. So here's one. Um, I was talking to this woman at a retreat this weekend, and she talked about how when she was young, people, including her family members, told her she was stupid, that she wasn't intelligent. So for years and years and years, she believed that, and she operated from that belief that I'm stupid. So she looked for evidence to support that in everything that she did. So it didn't matter if somebody gave her praise and told her that she was so smart, she wasn't going to accept that because the story she's telling herself is that she's stupid and she can't do anything right. So she's finding in her life all these areas where she can't do anything right, which is just keeping her stuck at this particular level in her life and not allowing her to move on to something different. Like at this retreat, we had a lawyer who was present. And so this woman who thought she was stupid was talking. And the lawyer, at the end of what she said, "Man, you need to go to law school. I want to support you in going to law school. You are so intelligent."
It gives me chills.
Right? And so now she's at a place where she's starting to receive that, right? She's starting to recognize that that old story of I'm stupid isn't true. That was something that was placed on her and that she, you could say, wore for a while. But now, as she finds her voice, as she um, sees her own value, she's speaking up and people are listening and saying, "Oh wow, you actually have something here." You know, "Oh, you are intelligent. You are."
Yeah. It's like she was diagnosed,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
And that's what it is. All the stories are just diagnoses of what we think or what someone else thinks is going on with us, or and really just a reflection of what's going on with them or how they think
Right.
about themselves.
Yes.
Or we're going walking around diagnosing everything.
Yes.
Like there's no diagnosis. There's something the other day that I was listening to. I can't remember who said this, but whenever you label something, you don't get it no longer is what it is.
Right.
It becomes what you think it is.
Hmm.
You don't get to experience it for its the wholeness of it.
Well, yeah. So here's an example of that. I don't remember what I was listening to or reading the other day, and it was talking about um when we label things. So, like, for example, if I label something a leaf, then what's your idea of a leaf? Like, you have a specific idea in your head when I say leaf, right?
Hmm.
And generally, it's going to be round, green in color, you know, and it's going to be a particular shape and it's going to be a particular size. That's what you see as a leaf. But if you look out in your environment, there are very few leaves that are actually green. They're variations of green and yellow and blue and orange
Red and
and
yeah,
yeah, there's so many different colors
and different
and
shapes and
different shapes and sizes and a leaf is so limited.
yeah. I think we were listening to the same thing because that was the example was the leaf. But it's true. It's like it is so much more than just a leaf. Because also, you're not taking into consideration the photosynthesis that's happening. Like all of the things that are happening beyond like what your eyes can see.
Right.
And that's kind of like why I was thinking about this in terms of like also looking at like animals and understanding animal behavior and how can you actually know why an animal does what it does because you think that based on your observation that a bear hibernates because of whatever reason. But it's like, do we actually know? Like, how do you know that there's not more reasons to that? How do you know that, you know what I mean? Like, you're not a bear.
Right.
You don't know, like, you can make a guess based on what you see.
Right. Or think about all the animals, we think of a wolf as a predator, right? But oh, here's one. So the other day I was reading something about this goose that for whatever reason it lost its home, it's lost its nest, it didn't have a safe place to nest. And so the goose finds an eagle nest and lays her eggs in the eagle nest. Now you think because the eagle is the predator and eats baby geese and, um, small animals, that the goose, that first of all, that the eagle would kick the goose out of its nest, or it wouldn't produce its own offspring in that nest because this goose is in there. But what they found was that the eagle and the goose both laid their eggs in the nest and sat side by side
Oh,
to hatch. Now, I don't know what's going to happen when the babies are hatched, but my guess is that, I mean, it could be anything, but my guess is that the eagle is not going to behave in the way that we expect the eagle to behave.
yes. Well, okay, and isn't this just brings us full circle to the narcissism? Because does that not prove that we are living in a very narcissistic society in the idea that we think we know what the eagle is going to do or the goose is going to do? Everything in nature is intelligent. Like you come from a we came from an intelligent we are intelligent because
Creator.
we came from an intelligent source.
Right.
Everything in our environment is intelligent, is communicating with each other. So we can't actually know what the outcome of any given situation is. And this was like Zach Bush was talking about kind of like this concept, but he brought up an example of eagles fishing, like getting fish, and how we think that the eagle goes down and grabs the fish out of the water. But what we found actually is that the fish jumps out of the water into the eagle's talons. So how do you know? Like it's a mutual agreement. These two
Right.
souls, these two bodies made an agreement. The fish was ready to go and the eagle was hungry, and they came together.
Mm-hmm.
Or another example was these people were tracking this wolf or um, this wolf pack or something like that, and they found that in the middle of the night, the alpha wolf was meeting with the alpha um, deer, and they were having a conversation. Like the wolf wasn't eating the deer like you would think. They were doing a dance, and the next day the wolf went and attacked the herd. Because and so it was kind of like this question or this idea of like, well, they were having an agreement, and maybe the alpha was like letting the wolf know, like, hey, this one is ready to go and this one's ready to go and whatever. Um, I don't know, but
Yes.
it begs the question, like, there's more to what we think,
Right.
and we
That
are
gives
not
me
superior.
goosebumps. Not even close. And I think, going back to um, being in primary school, elementary school, and learning about animals, I remember it being very definitive about, this animal is the apex and this is the way that they behave. And this animal is, you know, I don't know what the other,
Yeah, like a prey or like a
right. Um, and so they're always going to behave this way. And I think it's way more nuanced than we have any idea.
yeah,
And in native indigenous cultures, they have the idea of reciprocity um and the reverence of life. And so when they go to take a life, they appreciate wholeheartedly what that animal is offering by giving up its life to them. And I think they have that idea already that there's an agreement between themselves and this animal that this was going to
Hmm.
happen at this time in order to nourish this person, this tribe.
Yeah. Yeah, because we're all worthy of being here. So there's not one species or anything that is better than another.
No,
And all the stories you're telling yourself about why are just reflecting your own beliefs about yourself.
right. Hmm. Well, I think this is a good place to end this conversation. Is there anything that you think would be useful to help people um, get out of their stories or
Just the acknowledgement that they're telling themselves a story. I mean, that's where you start, right?
yeah, bringing your awareness to the fact that you don't feel good
Feel good.
and then recognizing what story is happening that is perpetuating this feeling of uncomfortability, anxiety, pain, suffering, whatever.
Yeah.
Um, and then working on telling yourself a different story.
Mhm.
And a great tool that I've found, and I might have brought this up in a prior podcast, is Byron Katie's work, questioning your thoughts. You know, is this true? Uh, when I believe this thought, how do I feel? What happens in my body? What happens in my relationships? What happens around me when I believe this thought? And then looking at what your life would be like without the thought. How would
Mhm.
it be different? How would you show up? How would your relationships look? And then finally, turning that thought around to its opposite, to the other, you know, to see all the examples of how those can also be true, and that truly, whatever you want to believe can be true for you. It's up to you.
Yeah. And if you can't get to that, giving yourself permission to just be with the story that you're telling yourself. You know, don't try
Yeah,
to diagnose it or whatever.
right. Because awareness is what's going to change it ultimately. And it may not happen overnight, but the
No.
fact that you're now aware that you're believing this story means that each time you're in that story, you have the opportunity to look at it a little bit differently and look at what it means for you, which eventually means it's going to shift.
Yep. Well, it goes back to the leaf thing. If you can look at your story without calling it a leaf or calling it what or labeling it, then you can actually see the fullness and experience the wholeness of the story that you're telling yourself and the sensations that you're feeling. And it might take coming back a whole bunch of times to look at this thing, to experience this thing that is not you, and just be aware of it. And that within itself is going to give you so much information and understanding and eventually allow you to shift the story.
Yes, very good. Very good.
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us for another edition to Ascend to Earth. We're so happy to have you, and we look forward to seeing you on our next call.